Epic Action, a Star Wars Unlimited podcast. Your source for community building, tournament tips, deck building discussion, and all things Star Wars Unlimited.
And welcome back to Epic Action, a Star Wars Unlimited podcast. I'm Raul. With me I have Paul, Nick, and a very special guest with us today, Sunny, who recently won the Tower of Games PQ at Virginia Beach. How you doing, Sunny?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, really appreciate you taking the time to join us. We usually try to open with a sort of silly icebreaker question, and this week we wanted to ask everybody what's their favorite piece of Star Wars media. I can go ahead and take it off. I love the Clone Wars, Rebels, like that series, the animated series. But people who don't know, I have 3 dogs. They're named Ahsoka, Hera, and Sabine. So I'm just like really into the characters, and I thought it did a really good job of really expanding the story and the character arcs of the characters from episode 1, 2, and 3, especially Anakin, who Hayden Christensen did fine, but with his animated character, it really like fleshed it out and put a lot of weight on everything that happened.
Dang it, you took mine. I was gonna go with Clone Wars. Anakin's my favorite. So I'll go Battlefront.
Okay.
The game series. Iden's another one of my favorite characters, mostly because the actress that voices Iden played a huge role in one of my favorite shows, The League.
Oh, yeah.
I was super pumped when they announced she was going to be in the games, and I've loved it ever since. So
I have a pretty awesome picture with her. I met her at Star Celebration a couple years ago, and I was wearing my Inferno Squad costume. I was Del Mico, and I have her holding my helmet. So
nice,
it's pretty cool. What about you, Paul?
For me, man, I'm gonna go almost hot take here. It's more of a tie, though. Really, like I could go hot take and say like Rogue One,
Christmas special, right?
I could say Rogue One, but I've been thinking about it all day, man, and for me, I think it's really Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah.
I think Shocker the old guy goes with the old.
Yeah, it wasn't
that much older, guys. Come on. But Empire Strikes Back, I think, does a really great job of giving us what Star Wars is. It shows the might of the Empire, and it is a destination movie out of all of them. Like, I think in Empire Strikes Back, we're probably going to see the most destinations out of the media content.
True. Good Hoth, Dagobah, Cloud City. Anywhere else we're missing?
Tatooine.
Yeah, no, that definitely. Empire Strikes Back. That was my favorite. I think it is my favorite movie. I think it's probably the best one out of everything that's released so far. Good. All right, Sunny, what's yours?
Okay, this is going to be a controversial one for sure, because this piece of Star Wars content, I mean, it's I think in recent years gotten a lot better because of the backlash on the sequel trilogy, right? but my favorite Star Wars content is Episode 1, The Phantom Menace.
Okay.
And that is because it was the very first movie that I ever watched in theaters.
Oh, that's awesome.
Wow.
Nice.
Sentimental reason. Yeah. But as a kid, that was the very first Star Wars material that I got to see in the theaters with my dad. So definitely.
For sure. I mean, Lucas always says he makes these movies for kids. Yeah. So like you and I, that was not my first movie, but it was one of my first movies that I got to go see. And as a kid, you don't care if it's good or bad. It's fun. Right. You enjoy it.
Exactly. Yeah, I was like a 5-year-old kid, and then at that time I got a Qui-Gon Jinn lightsaber as well.
Nice.
So it was.
Oh, I had that double-sided Maul saber, and man, did I break some stuff with it.
Yep.
Very good. Awesome. All right, so let's dive right into it. Sunny, tell us a little bit about your background and trading card games. Is there any other games you play?
Yeah, so I started out playing trading card games with Yu-Gi-Oh! Way back in my childhood. I played a little bit and collected a little bit of Pokemon as well. back then, but I think Yu-Gi-Oh was my primary game for much of the early 2000s when it first came out, and I started being a little bit competitive in that game. Into college, I played a little bit of Magic, but more casually. I continued into Yu-Gi-Oh, and I actually judged quite a bit of events in Yu-Gi-Oh, including at the national and world championship level. Then, one of my favorite games that I got into for TCGs was the Dragon Ball Z
Oh, nice.
card game, and I had played that extremely competitively. It was very similar to this game, and the last year of that Dragon Ball Z game, that when it was owned by a company called Panini, which is that sports card company, I had won their world tournament, and
Nice.
after that, I played a little bit of Destiny, but I was more of a casual Destiny player because it was kind of the onset of my professional life and career, so I was balancing that. So I just played it a little casually. I didn't go to too many big events, and this game I picked up more competitively, I would say.
Nice.
Nice.
Good feedback.
Why'd you get into this one as opposed
Yeah.
to different games?
So Destiny, I really liked on the onset of the game. Actually, I was even more hyped by about Destiny when it first launched than this one. I came right off of that Dragon Ball Z card game,
Yeah.
and the Dragon Ball Z card game had a mechanic that was or mechanic slash methodology of play that is similar to both Destiny and this. And that's that chess style of playing. You make a move, your opponent makes a move, right? You don't play out your full turn of cards, and then your opponent plays out their full turn of cards, right? So I really like that sequencing aspect of you're making an individual action, and then your opponent's making an individual action, right? You get to respond to things immediately. You get sequencing is very important, right?
Yep.
As opposed to in different games. So that's what immediately caught my eye when I made the transition into Destiny. And I knew about that game even while I was playing that Star Wars game because I went to Gen Con that year, and that was the year that right before Destiny came out, they previewed and demoed Destiny Fantasy Fight games for us there at Gen Con. So I picked up those that Ray and Kylo promo they had back then, and I started playing it semi-competitively, semi-casually. And uh, when it came to this game, I was at AwesomeCon last year in March, and I was just there because one of my friends was um, gonna be out of town, and he had a pass, and he told me that Hayden Christensen and Rosaria Dawson were gonna be there. So
Nice.
so he gave me the pass, and I went, and I stumbled into the board game room, and one of our local players that we play with, Joseph, demoed me this game, and then I was like, wow, this is just like Destiny. So
Yeah, pretty much.
yeah, I
Yep.
got into it from that
Nice.
point. Yep.
Awesome. Paul, do you want to, or yeah, Nick or Paul, do you want to do the next question?
Sure. How was your PQ experience when you were at Virginia Beach?
Yeah, it was fantastic. Much better than I expected. I know that Paul, you said you live in the that area, but I had not frequented the Virginia Beach, Norfolk area in some time. I had some friends, but it had been a while since I had been, so I didn't know what to expect in terms of their gaming scene and their tabletop scene, right? But I was extremely impressed by their accommodation towards their players, right? They gave not just pricing for the top cut, but I noticed that they're reaching out to players as they were dropping, saying that make sure that you come get the pricing that you have for your placement. There's pricing all throughout the standings, right?
Nice.
So that's not something that every PQ has done. And game store wise as well, a lot of great decor, a lot of great space, good selection of board games too. I ended up buying a couple board games before I left.
What you get?
And I got the Star Wars Rebellion board. And this was
Oh, I
with
love
the,
this one.
the prize credit from the PQ because the prize
That's
credit
like
they
Oh,
gave us
nice.
that's
some.
probably my favorite Star Wars board game. It's so good.
Yeah, I got that game and two more. It was the Betrayal on the House on the Hill, the new edition of it for my nephew. I like getting some board games that I can give to my nephews and nieces, right? So
Nice.
I got one of those, and then one last game that it's probably it's
Yeah,
probably written here
it
somewhere, but
was a long day, I'm sure.
yeah, I got
Yeah. So they were like super active on social media, like posting all throughout the day, like standings.
yeah.
And I remember you're finishing close to midnight. Is that right?
It wasn't that late. We
Okay.
finished around like 9:30, I would
Oh,
say.
okay. I mean, I was thinking
It
of
Oh,
our
was
showdown.
yeah.
Woo!
It
Yeah, our
was
showdown 1 a.m.
Yeah.
yeah. It was late, but not outrageously late. And the other thing that they did, which was really cool and good for players that attended, is they gave everyone a 15% discount on Star Wars product during that day. Who was
Nice.
signed up for the
Very
PQ,
nice.
right? So I got the 15% off of the Star Wars Rebellion game, and then
Oh,
yeah, which is
that's
a pretty expensive game. It's like $100 game, right?
Yeah.
So it's
Make
not
sure you
bad.
get
that.
the expansion that really makes the game like yeah, from a 9
Cool.
to
Yeah,
11.
I'll look into that. What's the name of the expansion?
I don't remember, but it's like based around like Rogue One, so it has like Krennic and Jin and like a bunch of new ships and stuff you can add to it. But
Cool,
like,
cool.
yeah,
Take a look. Yeah,
yeah,
what drew me to that is I've heard it's similar to Twilight Struggle a little bit, and I played that game with my roommate. For years I've been playing that one. So this one's Star Wars themed, and that one is Cold War themed.
yeah. Nice. Hey, go ahead, Nick.
Well, we know you played Han Green, but
On
it's a
one.
little bit, yeah, Han1 Green. Sorry, but it's a little different than what I've seen in the past.
Yeah.
So, like, what's your thoughts behind it? What was your thoughts playing it against the rest of the field?
Yeah. I thought this was a really good deck going into the field. It was a little bit under the radar. Han in general was not under the radar, but the green version was. Everyone plays yellow right now.
Yeah.
Now post this event from I did well with it, but not only myself. There's another player, Ian, who did really well 2 consecutive events in a row with Han Green. So it may be on the uptick in popularity. Um, there's quite a bit of differences between this Han Green and the typical Han Green that people have run till this point. This particular Han Green runs very heavy ramp cards and a few out of aspect cards that you don't necessarily see in all the lists, and a decent ambush, low to the ground ambush package, I would say, right? So in past Han Greens, you would see cards like Syndicate Lackeys. In the newer version, you would see maybe Plo Koon. Those aren't necessarily as low cost as the ambushers that you have in this deck. In this deck, you have modded cohort at 4, and you have uh, Cloud Rider at 2, right? And the out of aspect units, there's 2 Lukes. There's a Cad Bane. Um, those are really, really good. So Luke is actually the best thing you can find off of Ewing, in my
Yeah,
opinion, more so than Han, more so than even Empy's Nest, which Empy's Nest is one of the most underrated cards for sure. But number one Ewing target is Luke in most game scripts. Cad Bane, I included that because it serves a purpose that none of the other sevens had. So the sevens, they could deal with like 1 or 2 threats, right? So if it's a Han unit, then it deals with the threat in ground, ambushing with first strike. Luke and Emphys can do either arena, and they both have their own benefits, but nothing can answer 2+ units at once, or one huge unit, right? That's
Right.
maybe 8 HP defense. So Cad Bane did serve that niche, and it came up quite often throughout the day. And then the last 7 that is interesting that a lot of people don't run. I think I was like the only Han Green player maining this card till this point was Tranquility. And Tranquility is one of my favorite cards in the deck because it's a not undercosted space unit, right? For 7. And it actually, if you look at its stats, it's a 7/6. It has better stats than the ground units of the same cost in the deck. So Emphy's Nest is 5/7, Luke 6/7, Han 6/6, right? So a 7/6 is actually the biggest unit biggest power unit you have. And on top of that, it's one in space, right? So space is up until this point less contested arena. So it actually feels even more amplified and most often units are understated, sorry, because they're in space. This one is not understated in space. So I thought it was really good for lane dodging, for having that bit of beat stick that people have less answers to unless they're playing Bloop. And there's a recursion loop with Tranquilities. So Tranquilities' effect is it adds a Republic unit from the discard pile to hand, and you can have one Tranquility in the discard pile. You draw your second, or you play your second off of Ewing. Then you add the one from the discard. Now you can keep cycling them infinitely as long as you want to use your turn on those 7s, right?
I was wondering what you're pulling. Yeah.
I was going to ask you about that. How often did that come up? Your thoughts
Yeah.
on, I know, maybe playing it with Han, and then if you get it early, discarding it out.
Yeah. So that's the strength of running that combo in this specific deck versus other decks is you can always resource it and then selectively discard the Tranquility, the first Tranquility, right? So that you're set up for that loop. In other decks you can't necessarily destroy your resources. You have to use some kind of discard effect, right? And speaking of discards effects, you can use R2 pitch the first Tranquility. That's another way you can get it in the discard without having to even do that selectively defeat. So it's easy to set up. How often did it come up throughout the day? It came out a decent amount. It wasn't a crazy amount. There were some situations where you just had Tranquility without the loop. And that's okay because you saw one and then maybe you'll see your next one, right?
Yeah.
The more I think like in the moment I thought Tranquility was good, not great. But then now as I'm doing more of a retro, I realized that I played Tranquility much more than I initially thought that day. And the way that I was playing it was more to lane dodge and just have something unanswered in space, right? The loop was what came up maybe twice throughout the day. And when it came up, it was still good, right? Yeah. And
So
even if you don't loop Tranquilities, you can add R2 back to hand. And R2 helps you set up your end game. It's like a end game engine because if you attack with the Tranquility you use to add the R2, you can play R2 the next turn for 1, pitch a card, and then find another 7 or another power card. It just keeps setting up your power card end game, right? So it was underrated.
yeah.
For
So what would you say is like the weaknesses of this deck and the strengths?
Yeah, the weakness of this deck, right? So first off, I'll say that this deck uh doesn't have any auto wins. Right? So it doesn't it can lose to literally every deck. And that might be a disappointment to people playing it, right? So the this deck doesn't have it can lose to every deck, but it has a lot of auto win draws. So if you draw ramp and you're ahead of your opponent, they don't have an answer to your flip. Regardless of the matchup, it's going to be very tough for them, right? If you have DJ Tech on curve, it's going to be really tough for them. So things like that make it so that this deck it's similar to Boba in that sense, because Boba, it was you draw resupply and you get to that flip turn. There's not much that can compete with that. So this also, to a lesser extent, has those auto win lines. But if you don't have those auto win lines, um, or your auto win lines kind of get answered, then you can potentially lose to anything with this deck. So that being said, there are some matchups that I really do consider as tough, and I think it's mostly villain blue green. And it's funny because that's what I played in the finals against Andrew, villain
Yeah.
blue green Kira, right? I think that is the toughest matchup because they have ramp, they have stronger endgame units than your endgame units, right? Avenger, Devastator, right? Snoke, all those cards.
Yeah.
And they have ways to deal with your flip turn because they have ECL into like a Gideon Haas maybe before you flip, and then it will defeat something, so it'll be at 6. Then they can use that to ram your Han before it attacks. Or they can just, if they're on par with your flip, they can flip Kira, put your Han at 3 defense or 3 HP left, and then take it out that way, right? So that's a tough matchup. And I think that's the matchup that I think is the worst. And probably outside of that, playing in mirrors, both Han Yellow and Han Green. I think this deck is favored into Han Yellow because you can ramp ahead of them in most game scripts, but it's for sure not an easy matchup, I would say.
Nice. Yeah,
I want to know a
Would you-
little bit before we continue on
yeah.
about your race to 7.
Sure.
So like it might be a little technical, but what's your race to 7 looking like? Kind of what's your ideal opening hand? When are you choosing mulligan? And what are you dropping for your first 2 resources? Like ideally a hotshot blaster, right?
Yeah. So ideally, the most common hand that you want to look for is one with resupply in Green Han. That's been the case since set 1. I almost always mulligan a hand that doesn't have resupply unless it has both tech and DJ, or it has such a good curve without either of those, without resupply or without tech and DJ. An example of that is so you could have like R2 plus 2 smuggle cards, so R2 plus a uh 2 hotshot blasters or a hotshot blaster and a DJ, and then you have something that is worth pitching in your discard pile for R2. It could be the Tranquility, it could be a Marauder. So I would keep that hand. So if it's and that did come up like a couple times throughout this tournament and elsewhere that I was playing, where you kept a hand that doesn't have DJ tag or doesn't have resupply, but it has those, or it has Cloud Rider plus a Spark of Hope, right? Because you can play Cloud Rider even without ambush turn 1, and then if they play unit in ground, crash it turn 2, and then Spark of Hope. It's the same thing as a resupply, pretty much. So those are the hands you look for to keep. There can be hands that you mulligan into, which could be kind of clunky, and you kind of need to figure out how to play your way through it. Example is like 3 7s or 8, and then like only 1 3 or something like that, right? And no 2s. But the fact that you can play a little bit of head of curve, turn by turn, allows you to get out of those situations, right? So if you need to play a 3 on turn 1 for the sake of playing a 3, like your best play is maybe a Sundari Peacekeeper, right? You can still make that play. Or even if you need to just put out DJ turn 1, you can make that play, and you can still win games doing that. One thing I'll mention, that an underrated card that uh, in the deck that wasn't played so much or so heavily in set 2, but I think going forward it should be played much more, is Marauder. This is a card that I was playing at 1 or 2 before, but I think now I don't see myself playing it less than 3 copies. That card is another card you look for early with R2, or you look for early with resupply, because the thing that a lot of people miss with Marauder is it can target itself if it's the only unit out. So if you have one Marauder in discard, you play a Marauder, you can ramp and flip to get to your sevens pretty quickly, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's one blowout line, right? That I don't think I've lost the game or even seen someone do this line and lose, where you have resupply double Marauder. If you have that line, then you can flip Han on turn 2 itself, and it's pretty nasty, right?
You won't believe some of the degeneracy coming out of Han Green. The reason we got
Talk about you, Rick.
we got a friend who's constantly like double ramping, getting Han out turn 2,
Yeah.
8 resources turn 2, and I'm just like, somebody's gonna come across the table on you if you keep doing that.
So if you do it with double resupply, it's not as good as resupply and double Marauder. Because if you
Okay.
do it double resupply, you're sacrificing board present to just get out of Han.
Right.
But if you do it with resupply double Marauder, suddenly in turn 2 you're having a unit in space which is too big for turn 2 and a unit in ground which is too big for turn 2, right? So it's like you're arena dodging, or you're putting presence in 2 arenas with units that are overstated, and all they can do on turn 2 is play like a 3-coster, right?
Right.
So yeah, it seems like a blowout. Yeah.
I mean, Marauder even on curve is rough to deal with at times. I mean, just it's a good statted space unit in a meta that doesn't have a lot of good statted space units.
It's good. It's well statted. It's well statted because of the ambush for sure.
Yeah.
And into this meta that has Django in it. You might notice that in my list I don't play Bright Hope in the main or the side, and Marauder was the reason I didn't think I needed it. Right? I playtested about 100 games, and when I playtested those 100 games, the least played card that I had in the deck was Bright Hope, and I was like, this is crazy. It was even less played than the one of Cad Bane, right? And that just meant that I was, even though I had 2 Bright Hopes in the main at that point, I was just choosing not to play it. And I analyzed that, and that was because of Marauder, right? So when I was playing against Django matchups, Marauder was 2-for-1ing their space units while also giving me a ramp. While all Bright Hope was doing was just presenting a wall, right? Defensive wall. It wasn't like 2-for-1ing their units and also ramping you. So Marauder was was key there.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, before we move on, look, I'm always fascinated with people's choices in sideboard.
Yeah.
If you go in a little bit into your thoughts there.
Yeah. There's a lot of ways you can sideboard, just like you can build Green Han in a lot of ways. So this sideboard that I played on Saturday, it had 3 Spark Rebellion, 3 Scanning Officer, 2 Cunning, and 2 Traitorous. So the sideboarding strategy that I had was very streamlined. I just brought in 3. If it was versus Han, I brought in 3 Scanning Officers. I took out 3 Sundari Peacekeeper. And then versus Control, I brought in 3 Spark of Rebellion, and oftentimes I would take out 1 or 2 of the ambushers, right? Like 1 Modded Chord or 1 Cloud Rider, and then a Sundari Peacekeeper to fit them in. And the cunning is kind of my specialty card for 6. I take the approach against aggro decks to outrace them. And I feel like that this deck can do that because of the ramp. It does feel like you're able to be 1 action or 2 actions ahead of them if you hit their base, because you're playing a bigger unit than they are on curve, and then you're able to do something crazy with resupply and flip ahead of them and play a 7, right? So cunning fits into that game plan, because if you're if you're both racing each other and then suddenly you play cunning and exhaust 2 of their units, boost one of your units, or even bounce one of their units, you're winning that race, right? It
Yeah.
just amplifies that game plan. So I sided in Cunning versus Django versus Sabine and versus Quinlan Voss, right? So in the top cut, I played against a Quinlan in top 4. In Swiss, I played against 2 Sabines and then Django. I didn't lose those matchups. And all of those I was siding in double Cunning. Now, Traitorous, I would say, was the weakest card in my sideboard. Just because I feel like the answers for most of the decks that I want to side in Traitorous, the answers were there, right?
Okay.
So Sabine, Traitorous is a good card, but they have Poe and you can get blown out because they can destroy the upgrade and take back their unit. And the red decks, like Django, it would be a good card, but sometimes they bring in Disabling Fan Fighter. So I did side this in several times throughout the day, but I think I actually only played it once in the day. And the one time I played it, it was pretty impactful. I I played against a Krennic ECL player, and I brought it in because I knew he had a lot of like those 3 cost or less units.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he wants to like damage them and then give them like an extra power. So I played it versus a super laser tech and it was a blowout, right? So that's like the one maybe sided it in like 3 or 4 games, but that was the only game I played it and it was very impactful. I think it was the overall the worst card on the side.
Hindsight, would you change it to anything different?
Yeah, so if I expect more Django's going forward, I would side the 2 Bright Hopes. I wouldn't main deck Bright Hope, but I would consider siding 2 extra Bright Hopes. Yeah.
Nice.
Over the Traitorous because I don't think Traitorous did. Like I said, it only played it once throughout the day. Yeah.
Well, I'm expecting a lot more Hans going forward here.
Yeah.
FFG did mention on their stream that they're aware of the win rate and they're keeping an eye on it, but they're not planning on doing anything yet. Do you think anything needs to be done?
Yeah. I mean, I've been a Han player since the beginning of the game in March. I think it was probably the second deck I built was Han Green after building a Thrawn deck. That was the very first deck I built, which wasn't that great. But
Let's go.
yeah, but yeah, so I love Han as a leader, but I do think that they should do something. And my thoughts on it before the rotation announcement were that similar to Boba, it should just be banned. Um, but now that they introduced this rotation, I don't no longer have that mentality. I think that rotation kind of fixes that because anyways it's going to be rotated out by set 7, right? So my theory before the rotation was that just like Boba, Han is a very future-proof leader. As the card pool gets better and better, that temp ramp is always going to enable you to have better plays ahead of curve, right? So just banning something like DJ is not gonna make Han. It's not. It's gonna get rid of that unfair mechanic with DJ, but it's not going to take Han out of the meta or be like a significant hit to Han. It'll still be a top deck, right? If not one of the top 3, right? So
What if they
uh,
change? At
yeah,
least I know you said the DJ is not the biggest issue.
yeah,
Having played a little bit of Boss Green, I felt like I could at least keep up even with Han.
yeah.
As they're ramping and doing the DJ. But people have talked about maybe changing the DJ mechanics so you can't discard your opponent's resource.
That would entail an errata, and I would be on
Yeah,
board with that actually. I don't know if they said they would do erratas. I think they were they
been
didn't want to
very
do that
hesitant.
the first situation we had, but maybe they'll change their mind. I could see them doing that where you can only defeat resources that you own with Han.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if based on what they said before, I think the correct approach right now is just ban DJ. Yeah. Um, because Han is going to be rotated out by set 7, and then
Yeah.
it will get rid of the messed up interaction. Yeah, that we have.
So, what are your thoughts on the rotation then? Since
Good
we'll
segue.
wrap it up, here, and
Sure.
you know they're gonna. It sounds like they're gonna just cut all the first three on March of 2026. Honestly, a little bit of shock to me. I would have just cut the first set and let every set basically get 2 years. But they're gonna cut sets
Yeah,
2 and
first
3
three
short.
sets is it's an aggressive rotation for sure. I like the idea of rotation. I've played in one other TCG. I mean, Destiny had it, but I think it's a good thing.
Sure.
Especially since the early leaders that we've had, we've seen like that they've clearly been resilient throughout this
Yeah.
first three sets, right? And it's hard to see them not being that going forward. Specifically talking about Han and Sabine, and then even some of these blue-green villain leaders, I think, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think if they're not taking the approach of every set power creeps the previous set, then rotations is the best way to do it because it will encourage people to play the more recent stuff. Right?
Yeah, I'm all on board for rotation. I just feel like it's
Yeah.
too much too quick. Probably, I would have liked to have either, like I said, one set at a time out, or maybe give it another year
Mhm.
and then start
Yes,
doing the
yeah,
game
that
blocks.
you might be right on that aspect. Yeah, I mean, it was a little bit aggressive. Um, and they're saying that they're doing anywhere between 3 and 6 sets legal at a time. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess by set 7, we'll have 4, 5, 6, and 7 legal, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Is that what it is? Okay. Yeah. So
Yeah, my only concern is like that third set that comes out late in the year, you're not going to get to play much of it, and then it's only rotating. It's basically like a year's worth of play, and then it's rotating out. Like Twilight of the Republic's going to get the shortest leg room of all the first three sets. It just would have been nice to see where like Shadows
that
and
is
Twilight.
true. Yeah, yeah, that is 100% true. Some of these got less limelight, but the thing is, Twilight of the Republic honestly felt really weak.
Sure. But
So
if you got rid of set one, maybe that kind of shows out a little bit
true,
more.
true. Yeah, yeah, maybe it would be a little bit more prominent. Some of the cards would have been. Some of those coordinate interactions might be played a little bit more. Yeah. Especially because overwhelming barrage is gone, right? That was only in set
Right.
one. Yeah, so
Nick loves that
um
card.
yeah.
Yeah, I do like the card.
I will say that overwhelming barrage is like not too heavily played in this meta. Um as it was in the set one meta, at least set one and into set two with Boba Green and
Yeah.
those villain green decks being played a little bit more, right? But still, rotate if they just rotated out set one, you're probably right. We would have seen some of those like Republic combos, maybe at the forefront, separatist combos, exploit combos at the forefront a little bit more. Yeah.
Sweet.
Well, I'm super excited.
Well,
I think rotation's going to be great. It's
Yeah.
it's going to get more people buying more packs, and for all intents and purposes, for the lifespan of the game, the things that they're talking about with the pack changes, I know that it sucks from a consumer standpoint, and it sucks if you're maybe not one of the whales or the collectors out here that's trying to get at least a play set of everything. But when you buy packs, you're supporting the game. And if we're talking about longevity, and we want to make it to set 12, right? A lot of people's concerns are, is Star Wars going to make it to set X, right? I'm not going to set a number or anything, but with Shadows of the Galaxy, I saw videos, I'd listened to podcasts where people were saying Star Wars is dying. And I get it, the value drops, but players are going to play. And buying packs makes new cards, keeps the game around. gets more players involved. So if rotating out set 1 through 3 gives us another 10 sets, great.
Yeah. I think if that's what the impact will be, I'm all for it. Yeah. I think I like rotation as a concept.
Awesome. Well, are there any big events you're planning to go to coming up?
This weekend, I will be going to the West Virginia PQ.
Okay.
So I'm going with a few of our other local players. So Andrew, who I played in the finals. The cool thing, so I know you didn't ask me. Someone asked me what was my favorite thing about the weekend. And my favorite thing is I drove with Andrew to the event, right? And
Ooh.
so me and Andrew drove together and we stayed in the same hotel and then we were in the finals, right? So
Yeah.
that's pretty special, right? To have that. And
Yeah.
so yeah, we're going again to West Virginia and then we'll see how you do there.
That might speak to your guys' prep a little bit too, right? So, like, is there
Yeah.
anything special about your guys' prep routine because you both ended up in the finals?
Yeah. I mean, we talked heavily throughout the drive over the night before, right? Even like sprinkled through the week leading up to it. We theory crafted a lot of things for different matchups. He played a very different deck than I did, but if you really think about it, like there's a lot of similarities that you can draw, even though they're different colors, right? And different leaders. So like he has also small units, and then he has ramp. He has a flip turn that is similar to Han's flip turn as well, right? And then he plays those end game units, a different set of them, right? So we could take some of the same approaches to different matchups. Yeah, and we discussed that in detail, and uh, we also discussed playing against each other, right? And who was favorites. So I think that's what I explained to you, that I thought that Kira ECL was favored because a lot of the discussion came from the discussion I had with him, right? So
Nice.
yeah. Mhm.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
Well, we will watch your career of great interest.
Thanks. Yeah.
I feel that.
I'm also planning to play in one PQ in February, but I want to play like an off meta deck, right?
Okay.
I'm thinking like right now to build a Chancellor Green. So
Ooh.
it's still the colors I like. It's still like yellow and green, but
Do a
it's
Wat
Chancellor.
Tambor yellow.
Yeah, I don't know about Watt Tempo. I don't like
Yeah, it's fun. I'll say that. Like even if you lose, it's fun.
that. Yeah.
Well, if you do it on stream, man, and you get the Jar Jar win, we got a trophy for you.
Yeah, have you heard about this? If you use Jar Jar and that's how you win,
Yeah.
it hits that base, we're giving you a trophy.
Oh, nice. Okay, yeah. Then I got a theory craft with Jar Jar.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Double
Let's see
yellow.
it. Awesome. Well, Sonny, thank you so much for joining us. It's been great talking to you.
Yep.
We're looking forward to seeing how you do this weekend. And yeah, anything else you'd like to add?
Oh no, thanks for having me, and thanks for running this podcast. It's really good for our community.
I appreciate it.
Yeah,
I love
thanks.
our home store Curio, right? And
Yeah.
I think we have a really good competitive and growing scene. You're contributing to that.
Awesome. Well, shout out to all the BMV players. I know made a large portion of the top cut at that PQ. So just these things. It's a very competitive scene here.
Did really well. Yep.
Awesome. Well, this has been Epic Action. I'm Raul.
I'm Nick.
Paul,
And Tommy, thanks.
The man, the myth, the legend. All right, next time.
good luck this weekend.
And welcome back to another episode of Star Wars. Oh, I got me confused. All right. Take 3.
Take 3.